Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Irish session, and welcome to a remembrance of Lars Sloan. Who here knew Lars Sloan? Some hands, yeah, yeah. So I'll just say something about him. One of the things I really wanted to do tonight was for people who knew him and loved him. I wanted to kind of us all to get together and tell stories about him, so that check two, 1 2. Okay. So that we could complete the, each other's picture of the man. A lot of people knew Lars because he was a performer. He was kind of a celebrity. He played the bagpipes, and he founded a whole bunch of bands. Um, I'll say he had this long performing career as a Highland piper and piper for dancing and piper for bands, and he had a lot of different careers. My first memory of him was I was 12 years old. I was playing the bagpipes in the St. Thomas Episcopal School pipe band, and I was at I think it was the Thanksgiving parade, and we were all formed up, all of us boys wearing kilts. This was in the 80s, before Braveheart, before it was cool to wear a kilt, So we're all 12 years old and more. We're all dressed up in kilts, and at that time, it was, if you wanted to make a young boy stand up straight, put him in a kilt, because it would be like, okay, who wants a piece? You're 12 years old, and you're wearing a kilt on the Houston city streets. So anyway, we're formed up as a band. We're about to march off into the parade, and this figure comes whooshing by me on roller skates with his pipes, and it was Lars. And he was part of a group called the Urban Animals that would skate all through downtown Houston, and there was like a drinking club, I think. And what I didn't know at the time was that my teacher, who was the head of music at St. Thomas Episcopal, my teacher who had won a gold medal, had been the first American to win a gold medal in Scotland, was this phenomenal piper, respected all over the world, just this one of the best pipers of his generation. His he was really, really good friends with Lars Sloan. They were drinking buddies, and so this was Lars's way of kind of tweaking him, playing a little prank on him. Like, I know you've got all these boys all lined up and all set, and I'm just gonna march. I'm just gonna skate through their ranks, holding the bagpipes, and show them, what you can also do with the pipes. And a few years later, I left the St. Thomas Episcopal School, and I wanted to still play the pipes and still play in a pipe band. And Lars, at that time, he had founded a pipe band called the Hamilton Pipe Band here in Houston, and it was something that he had gotten people to join, some adults to join, and it became he ended up leaving the band because he wanted to do special effects in movies. And so he turned the band over to another good friend of his that he had kind of grown up with back up in Detroit, Donald McPhee. And Donald took that band and we went from being the worst band in Houston. My goal at that time was I wanted to beat my old school, St. Thomas. Well, we went from being the worst pipe band in Houston to being the best pipe band in the United States. It was a very intense thing, and Lars founded that. A few years later, around the time I was in the band, I wanted to perform and play gigs and things like that, and I knew Lars had pipers out at the Texas Renaissance Festival. He had the contract for piping out at the Texas Renaissance Festival, and he was doing it with the Hamilton Pipe Band. But none of those guys wanted to do it because they had other things they wanted to do on the weekends. They wanted to be with their girlfriends and wives and play golf and things like that, and they didn't want to go to the Renaissance Festival. I, meanwhile, desperately wanted to go to the Renaissance Festival. And so I told Lars, I was 14 or 15 years old, I will do every weekend of that festival with you, and you won't have to call anybody else. I can do it. I can just tell you right now, I can do it. I didn't have a car. I couldn't drive. And so we did, and he founded a band called Clandestine. Lars did. And Clandestine's first gig was at the Texas Renaissance Festival, and it was Lars and some pipers, and he started that whole thing. He was directly responsible for the formation of a band called the Rogues, which was a beloved band. And the way it goes is that he had wanted to take Clandestine into folk clubs and folk festivals away from the Renaissance Festival, and so he was giving up. He was giving up this fairly lucrative contract at the Texas Renaissance Festival. Well, we thought it was lucrative at the time. It wasn't good money looking back on it, but we thought it was. And so he gave that contract to Randy Watke, but Randy had to come up with a new name, and he said, "Well, I don't know what to call it." And Lars said, "I don't care what you call it. Call it the Scottish Rogues." He said, "Really? Can I really call it that?" And so, he was really responsible for the creation. Giving that contract to Randy Watke. He founded Clandestine. He founded the Hamilton Pipe Band, and he was one of the co-founders of the band Jiggernaut, the Celtic rock band. I didn't know that he was one of the co-founders, but I asked Wolf, is that correct? And he said, absolutely, it was. There wouldn't be a Jiggernaut like that without Lars Sloan. There wouldn't be so many things in this town. In my whole performing career, I'm 47 now. I've been a professional performer for over 30 years. I know that there's no way I would have gotten into a performing career if I hadn't had Lars to give me that inspiration. And he was so good at inspiring people, and when you were around him, you felt like you could do anything. And I think that took a lot out of him, to be honest, because people just loved to be around him. He was like this source of light that people would bask in. And I could talk all night long about him, but I'd love for if anybody else would like to come up and talk about how they met him, or just a memory, please go right ahead. And I've got a if anybody knows people who knew him and would like to be here, there are you could text a video to me at my phone number or email ej@piperjones.com, and I can play it. And so we'll have some remembrances, and then we'll turn it over to the Irish session, and then we'll just talk about him quietly to ourselves, and we won't stream it. So there might be a lot of people watching this stream who can't be here because all of Lars's friends are scattered all over the world, all over the country, and so I'll just open the mic to whoever wants to go next. What about you, Mark? You knew him?
I didn't really know him.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We got some. Yeah.
I didn't know the guy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, he bartended at the Mucky Duck for a while in the early days. I mean, he was in a lot of places. Come on up, Chuck.
Thanks, EJ. Lars, EJ said it the best. He said it was a light. He was one of my first piping instructors, and one of the things that I saw in him that brought him the most joy, it doesn't matter if it was day 1 or day 1,000, if he saw his student progressing, to finally get that one thing, he would just light up, and that would just drive you to the next thing and the next thing, and then turn around, you look around, oh, I'm a piper, for better or for worse. And I will miss him sorely. Several years ago, I was in an auto accident and had a lot of nerve damage in my left arm and my left hand, and I'd given up, and I wanted to get back into it. I was going back and forth. EJ was another one that helped me kind of get back on the road, but Lars would not leave me alone. He wouldn't. So I'll always be grateful for that and for that man being in my life.
Might try playing a video that one of Lars's friends made, just a short remembrance of him. So I'll put the mic on the computer. Let's see here.
All right.
Okay, so Mary Morong, how did you meet Lars Sloan?
First time I met Lars Sloan was at the VA with my uncle over in the hill country. And I was about 11. And he was larger than life and crazier than sin. And never changed. And then he drugged me downtown when I got my driver's license so that I could watch St. Thomas St. Thomas High School play, and that's where I met you and Jeremy.
Wow, that's cool. When was that?
87.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was my first time driving downtown as the driver of the vehicle.
Wow. You went down together?
No, I met him at, what's the one that's now a church? It was a stadium. Right down here on 59.
Oh, the Summit?
The Summit.
Yeah.
The Summit. Yeah, he told me where to meet him at the Summit, and he and Paul were standing there.
Wow.
And jumped in my car and then helped me park.
Yeah.
Because it was the first time I'd ever parked in a parking garage, too.
That's great. Wow. How old were you?
I was 16.
Cool. Wow.
And, Lars didn't take no for an answer. And he was normally right when he told me that I had to do something. Yeah, I miss that man. I miss that man. All right, now quit videoing me.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I know. Okay, so he was 67 when he died. It was I think it was a combination of a stroke and a heart attack. So it was just about 2 weeks ago Lars passed away. He, as far as I knew, he grew up in Detroit. He learned piping up in Detroit from Walter Rose and from Sandy McPhee, who also lived here in Houston. And he was one of the at the time, he would have been one of the most talented players, not just in the United States, but in North America. He was a contemporary of the first American gold medalist, the first Canadian gold medalist. He was one of the most talented people, and I've seen a lot of pipers play. And my teacher, I would say, is one of the best pipers, Mike Cusack, one of the best pipers in the whole world of his generation. And Lars's fingers were on par with Mike's. I've only seen hands like Lars's a couple of 3 times in my whole life, and he was just insanely talented. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to say this tonight is people, when they know his performing career, they knew he played in a band, he played at festivals and things like that. But who he really was one of the most incredibly talented people. He had he also had a wonderful, generous heart. And if you look back at his life, you could look at all the things that he inspired and started, and this world would be a completely different place. My life would be completely different if I hadn't met him, if I hadn't known him. So, anybody else want to talk about him? And we'll turn it over to the Irish session if nobody else is going to come up. Yeah, maybe. Hey, Bobby. All right. Hey, Bobby. Tonight is session night, so probably what's going to happen in a few minutes is we're going to turn it over to the Irish session, and then we're going to huddle together, and that's when the real good Lars stories are going to come out. Bobby, hey, nice to see you. Hi.
So I was a student of this cat back in the 2002, 2003, and I used to drive from wherever the hell I was to Scarborough to go hang out with EJ and Lars at the closing gate just to do that show. And it was like my 5 minutes of fame when I was first starting out. But I would hang with Lars when we were at TRF, and he always had some little diddly bop thing to teach me and some over the top stuff. And I was working with Richard Keene a lot at the time, still taking lessons from EJ, working with Richard and getting tutored by Lars on the side. It was a great time. But Lars had an influence on me, like between him and EJ, I couldn't tell which one was my idol and which one was my brother. because they were both kind of like brothers to me. And this is hard. This is rough. This is a rough moment. I almost didn't make it down here because it hit me really hard. But I got memories with that cat. I got some goofy ass pictures that were taken at the gate that every time I go through my old photos, I look at them and I'm just like, oh, goofball. He was a goofball. He had a good spirit, and he loved people, and he loved doing what he did. And it inspired me to step up and kind of get away from some of the rebel music that Richard was having me do and get back to the traditional stuff that Lars and EJ were forcing on me at the time for the competitions and whatnot. It was all fun. But, yeah, this one is a stickler for traditional. But we had a lot of fun, and it's one of those things you can't replace a Lars. There's not a replacement. Lars, to me, was kind of like a Stevie Ray. There's not going to be a replacement for him. You can have other people that will step up and play and do the similar things, but they'll never do what he did. Nobody's ever going to take his place. He will always have his star on the Walk of Fame with pipes, as far as I'm concerned. And it's just good to see everybody here. But I wish it was under better circumstances. But I'm going to miss that cat. He was something else.
Good one, Bobby. Good job. Yeah. So I think maybe I'll put the mic down. We'll turn the stage over to the Irish session, and we'll, the people who knew Lars will fill in the gaps with each other. There might be one more thing I want to say, which is that. Remember, I said his light was really bright, and people basked in it, and that might have taken something out of him. He would sometimes go a long time out of touch with people. He would retreat, and people wouldn't hear from him for years. And I know, and everybody here who knows him knows that he has, across this country, thousands of people who have beautiful memories of him and love him dearly. And his request was that there would be no service, no memorial service. And I know what that's like as a performer to want to hide, and I think that he might have had some of that in him, that he wanted to retreat to privacy. So it's not a service that we're having. We're just filling in the gaps for each other about somebody that we knew and we were inspired by and we all loved very much. So let's have some tunes.